That was an interesting take, that essentially some of the problems are self-generated in a sense. We have a cultural mindset that pushes the children this way. All right. Well, what do you say, Bhavan?
Yeah, I'm going to go rogue for a while. I'm not going to talk about education. I'll talk about it later on in terms of higher education. But first, I want to touch on civil liberties that I think none of us spoke about. Lee Hsien Loong has made a mark, or has not made a mark, in terms of changes in civil liberties in Singapore. Today, I just want to raise something that came up just a few days ago. Martin C. says that, there could be a case of plants in civil society groups. Why do we still, in this 21st century, 2012, we still have this kind of conversation as if we are an Eastern European communist state where we have plants in civil society groups? Prime Minister took over in 2004. He talked about a more open society, but we have not seen that great changes in terms of allowing a civil society to thrive. We have seen what was done to TOC in terms of gazetting, in effect trying to control online media, trying to control non-mainstream media practitioners. So these are all under the purview of Prime Minister. Gazetting came from the PMO, right? And my team member spoke about racism and xenophobia. I just want to talk about another sensitive issue. It's about the status of Malays in Singapore. Prime Minister took over in 2004. Have you seen any kind of significant change? Can a Malay military officer become commanding officer of 1st Commando Battalion today? The answer is still no. After 8 years of Prime Minister Lee's premiership, we still have not seen great changes in those sacred cows that existed during Lee Kuan Yew and Goh Chok Tong's premiership. Next, my opposite number spoke about education. I came through the education system. I came from my father is a low income, went to good schools, went to university. So even though I sit on this side of the panel, I have very little things to say against the education system up to university level. But at higher education level, what are we doing? Are we being dynamic enough to create an economy that is self-sufficient in terms of, we talk about liberal arts. How can liberal arts education thrive in Singapore in the kind of environment that we have now? We talk about a new normal and everything else, but little has changed, I think. NUS, NTU, SMU, we are so focused on the international rankings, but are we doing enough to attract the best faculty in? And when we attract foreign students to come and make up the numbers, we say because we want to internationalize our campuses, are we bringing in the best talent? Another thing I want to touch on is on pressures on the youth. And the pressures on the youth, people like me and Visa here, our parents are, I think, from the baby boomer generation. There are 900,000 baby boomers, aged 48 to 65. Currently, they will form the so-called 30%. When in 2030 there will be the silver generation, or so-called, right? So it's a double problem, because it impacts on us and the silver generation, because in effect we will have to start our own families, and the silver generation will also have to take care of their healthcare needs and their retirement needs. Has the government done enough to ensure that my generation is not burdened, and that silver generation, the so-called Merdeka generation, who contributed the most in the 1980s and 90s to our huge reserves, are they being treated? Are they showing the rewards of their hard work or not? I think more can be done in terms of, we have a massive reserve. People say, the Straits Times say $800 billion. Why are we not talking about drawing down on the reserves? Since 2004 to now, the thinking about the usage of the reserves has not changed much. And on the national conversation, one last point. We're going to all these events, people are invited to the events, but we're going there and talking, what are we talking about? We don't have a Freedom of Information Act. So we're just going there and making motherhood statements. So if we really wanted to have a true conversation, then you should have freedom of information to start with. So the people on civil society, members of the public, can make substantive research and then go into these conversations and participate in these conversations as an equal partner.
You don't think as much has changed between Lee Kuan Yew's generation and his son's generation?
Well, communication and consultative approach. Now, what's the degree of communication do we want? And will it hamper our growth or our progress? You have shining examples like countries like India and China. On one side, China doesn't communicate much, doesn't go into consultative mode with the whole crowd and then decide over the policy. On the other hand, Indian government goes out, consult people, should we liberalize, we don't liberalize, and they go one step forward, two steps backwards. So we need an optimal level of consultation, an optimal level of communication when it comes to explaining government policy or getting the feedback from the ground. The policies are made for who? And I'm afraid I would disagree on certain issues like, it's a one-way communication, they're not listening to us. I'll give you one example about the casino. There was a huge amount of debate all across Singapore. Everyone, the church, the leaders, the temples, the colleges, everybody came forward, gave their views, and ultimately government decided. But because there was a time, just after the SARS, we were staring at growth level of just 1% or even going down. But we needed to boost our economy. How to do it? Okay, decide about this. And after a huge amount of debates and discussions, finally government came over the thing, okay, we'll go ahead with integrated resort. So there was a consultation, there was a communication, it's been for almost every issue. It's just that if we may feel like, if I don't like casino, the government will listen to my voice and I'll say, oh, they don't listen to me. But ultimately, what's the larger good for the country? That's what they go for. Secondly, about policy blunders, especially following the same kind of economic model. I guess Singapore's economic model has changed over time. The diversification started early 90s. When they came to know China is open, okay, manufacturing is migrating, why not diversify? That's when you see they're boosting more investments in terms of services industry, which contributes to 15% of the total growth, or manufacturing is still around 40%. Other sectors like construction is still around 25%. Biomed, they invested heavily, which contributes to 3% in the economy. So yes, I mean, they have diversified and they have communicated.
And basically the question is, what is supposed to be an optimal level of consultation?
I guess the question is when enough is enough when it comes to consultation. I think one of the things that we have to bear in mind is we're not against the mode of the consultation that is going on. I think the government is doing a very good job in having platforms to reach out to people and for the people to reach back. But one of the things you really have to consider is who really sets the agenda for this particular conversation. Now you brought up the issue of the casino. I think that was one very good example. Back then, the debate of casino was, well, is it going to degrade our moral standard? Is it going to cause unnecessary vice? And I think it was a healthy debate that was going on. And despite all my religious inclinations, I would really have to say, if you think that a casino is going to do you harm, just don't go. And so that was one part of the conversation. But the other thing that was going on at the back of my mind, look, is the casinos the only thing that we have considered so far? Are there any kind of other economic stimulus things that we can actually do apart from casinos? It felt very much like a quick fix. You see other countries doing it and you think that you can generate a huge amount of capital just by doing it. And so you just go ahead and do it. But if you have listened to some of the other voices, maybe you could have gotten a different conversation going on. They ask you, okay, if we do want a casino, what are we going to, what are we going to do? Okay, we have problems right now. What is it that we can do? But instead, all you have is a debate about whether casinos is good or bad, or we're going to put in place measures that will stop people from going to the casinos. Evidently, I don't think that's going to work very well. People still go overseas for casinos. So, so I'm just thinking that if we had taken a different look at the debate, how it would have been. I'm not sure whether you want to touch on the biomedical bit, but maybe just very quickly on it. I think we cannot forget somebody coming out to say that basically our biomed students are good enough to wash test tubes. I think there's something seriously wrong with that model when you've been pumping billions into the biomed sector, and and I guess it relates back to education. Are we getting the right students to fit that job at that point in time that will basically allow them to make a decent living? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Lian Chuan, you know, we were, I mean, you've looked at economic policy and economic strategies, and do you consider, for example, that we might not have discussed enough of what sort of economic strategies we might need, and that the casino proposal is a quick fix? Should we have gone further into thinking about what other ways in which we can boost growth post-SARS?
I think on the question of the casinos, I felt that, you know, apart from being an economic force in creating 20,000 to 30,000 jobs, a main reason for the government wanting to do that was to create a more lively global city. And if you actually read PM's parliamentary speech when he, you know, explained the government's decision to launch the casinos, that was the reason that he put forward, you know, to create a more lively, vibrant, different Singapore.
If I can just quickly add on that, I think we're kind of getting into this idea where it seems like, oh, we use the casino as a quick fix to the post-SARS situation, but I also think we should, I mean, definitely the idea of having, you know, a casino or integrated resort in Singapore has been something that has been on the back burner for like decades, and this seemed like the right time, and so that's why they chose it. I just want to put it in.
Sure, but I mean, I think I'm also making the point that the driver was not necessarily solely economic or profit.
Although I think at that particular time, the economic imperative was there.
I mean, that was certainly a factor. But the sense I got, and this was the sense I had when the casinos were launched, was that the non-economic factors were also important. You know, reading PM's speech in Parliament on that subject. Just I think on Sudhir's point, I think he sort of said two things. You know, he described two failures in government policy. One was coordination between ministries in terms of housing and transport, and secondly, the government being myopic. You know, I think on the question of coordination, I think there's some force, you know, to that in terms of, for example, housing. DPM Teo, I think, in response to Pritam Singh's question, you know, admitted that the government could do better in terms of, you know, rolling out the infrastructure. So I think there's some truth in that point, which one cannot really deny. Having said that, I think on transport is a huge lead time and really not very much you can do. I accept that on housing, you know, we could have managed the pricing process a bit better. But I would say the immigration strategy is not myopic. You know, I feel, perhaps I don't have the hard data, that it's actually a carefully calculated risk that the government has taken to do this in the long-term interest of Singapore. And they may not even have given all the reasons. Now, why do I say that? I think one reason is that, you know, the population dilemma and low birth rates is a real one and is a difficult one to fix. The government says that, you know, you want to boost birth rates, but that's low across Asia and it'll be a very hard fix. So actually taking in people, apart from the immediate, you know, economic boost, I think is part of the long-term strategy of the government to ensure that our population does not decline precipitously. So I think, far from being myopic, they are actually taking risk. And some of the risks include things like higher ethnic tension. I think we all don't like that, but I think the government believes that, you know, it will be able to manage that, and certainly it's trying its best. I would also say that, you know, the
foreign sort of labor strategy, so long as you don't overdo it, actually is a very rational strategy, in terms of what foreign workers do. DPMTO, I think, also said not long ago that, one of the good things about non-resident component of the population is that they contribute to your economy, but they don't, impose such a load on your social service. That sounds hard-nosed, but it's actually rational in a way. And, the other thing about the foreign worker strategy is that actually I think it helps the poor in this way, in that it contributes towards full employment. If you have this foreign worker buffer, you will be able to have an easier path to full employment, and unemployment affects poorer workers disproportionately. So I think, I would argue that the strategy is one that carries risks, but the government has done it deliberately, and I think it's not myopic in that sense.
Just to clarify, I wasn't very clear in my earlier thing, is that, the two problems I see are the coordination in ministries and the integration issue. And in both of those, I think you see myopia, not the actual bringing in of migrants. I agree that actual bringing in of migrants would have been a quite forced and well thought out policy. And I think with this immigration without proper integration, it has effectively threatened the entire Singapore project, Singapore identity, and the very notion of citizenship, and it's affected the way all Singaporeans think about themselves and their sense of belonging in this country. And I think, long after this administration has left office, this actually, this period in time, might be remembered as the period when a whole generation of Singaporeans became detached from the country. And I think at the crux of it is the flawed and myopic integration policies that we've had, and giving out citizenships very easily without thinking about whether that person can actually integrate well. All these things sort of add up together to the situation that we have today.
Essentially, if I can step out of my moderator role and offer an opinion, I happen to think that the immigration policy is the worst disaster to befall Singapore. And the government's approach to opening the tap so wide, in the last few years, has just wrought such horrific social consequences. And now my worry is that there will be economic consequences, given that now it's trying to tighten up.
Regarding this concerns about racism in Singapore, I still remember way back in 1991, I picked up a magazine, and a teen magazine, whereby there was some letter from one particular person from a racial profile. It said, "Why you all are like that?" and all. I saw repeatedly similar letter, like complaining about his skin color and stuff. So initially, yes, it was racism in the other form, like Chinese versus Indians versus Malays. They were there. We can't say it wasn't there, right? One good thing with all the immigration that has happened to Singapore is it has united all the Singaporeans. Now we no more talk about he is a Chinese, I'm an Indian, or he's a Malay. We are Singaporeans and they are foreigners. That has one good thing about bringing this immigration. Now, could the government have done much better job in terms of transportation? I would say, when you think about the transportation, laying down the MRT tracks and all, the latency to do that takes huge amount of time. Long, it'll take 5 or 6 years minimum. So the thing is that, they were not myopic, but the thing is that they thought, probably with the existing infrastructure, they'll be able to manage, and they would add it subsequently. And it just exploded beyond anybody's control, whereby the citizens of Singapore, they started complaining as to getting too crowded, the roads are getting congested and stuff like that. So the thing is that, yes, planning for transportation, usually what I know, takes minimum 10 years. So shall we wait for 10 years, then decide where to bring in more foreigners, which is important. We need now to save jobs. We need investment for the companies to come and invest here and create jobs for Singaporeans. Do we want like thousands of families to go home without food? No. My first concern is that.
Visakan, you said something about leadership just now and how you look at results, then you see whether or not leadership is there. I mean, have you changed your position or?
Yeah, we can't, okay, to be fair, we can't say that our leadership is exceptional at the level where, it's awe-inspiring and everyone else around the world should look at it as a model of leadership. You can see Singapore as a model of management. I think we have shown how that things should be managed, but in terms of how things should move forward for society, for economy, for everything, right? I think we need people who have the guts really to articulate vision. And I'm guessing that when we look at, whenever you see incumbents in a political system, they always have a natural bias towards maintaining the status quo to some degree. So, even if you look back to, let's say Lee Kuan Yew, right? Like, we tend to think of Lee Kuan Yew as the founder of Singapore. But he was once an opposition party leader, right? And his vision for Singapore was a change from the status quo. So, if you ask me, I think we will see in the next election or the ones after that, but I think the next election probably, we will see some we will see visions coming forward that will clash and change, and we might find that things are going to be very different.
Visions from within the PAP or from the opposition?
I suspect, I think, from a purely personal perspective, I find that both the visions from the PAP and the visions from the opposition seem very simplistic to me. Like, I find like I get very frustrated when I see...
Simplistic or similar?
Simplistic.
Okay.
Like, I get very frustrated when you see like opposition using like xenophobic rhetoric to try and win over Singaporeans. They're like, oh, you see all these foreigners. And I'm like, I think when we look at where Singapore is going in the next 10, 20 years, or where the world is going, we cannot change the fact that our idea of what a nation state is, or what it means to be Singaporean, what identity means, it is going to include foreigners and transit workers and all that. That is the way things are going to be. We can't change that. And I feel like nobody really seems willing. If I was a politician, if I was in a political party, I probably wouldn't be saying this because that's bad politics, right? So I guess it's up to people, in a self-referencing meta kind of way, I guess it's up to discussions like this where we point out these things so that the general public holds politicians accountable to these things. So so you ask whether it's visions from the PAP or from the opposition, I would go back to the French politician guy again, and we would have to have people with well-articulated vision, spreading it in the marketplace of ideas through blogs or through discussions like this, and the public will have to share it and see it, and then the leaders must look at what people want and realize that they have to give people what they want if they want to move forward. So that's how I see things evolving.
Just on the point on leadership versus managers, I think the example of leadership I always draw is from dive leaders. Scuba diver myself, so it's really something that you see. So one of the things that as a dive leader that you always have to be mindful of is that in any one group there'll always be divers who are less able, and then there'll always be divers who are very proficient, very adventurous, and basically pushing the boundaries. Now, the key thing about leadership in that situation is how you manage the expectations of both, such that both groups will basically get out of the water still alive and can still say, I enjoyed the dive. So I think that is what we are really, it probably sounds a bit simplistic and a little bit idealistic, but I think that's what we're really aiming for in terms of leadership. And it's a situation that you have to constantly access. When you have divers in the water, your eyes must always be on them. Are they in danger? Yes, you got to pull them back. Oh, those guys, they're going a bit too far, I've got to pull them back. Oh, they're okay, I can just leave them be. So it's a constant assessment, and I don't really see this kind of assessment that's going on in our so-called leaders. Then the point about whether are they managers, I just bring out this example. Recently, there was some talk about something that they plan to do in the town I live, Punggol. They're talking about increasing the population by 4-fold. If you stay there and you take a look at the transport system, I think it goes back to what Sudhir was talking about. There's really no foresight in it. It's really quite myopic. There's a big patch of land. We're going to build there and we're going to put people there. What are we going to do to transport? We don't know. So I think it's part of this process that we are really expecting think of really exceptional leaders?
I think the best hedge against an uncertain future is a plural system. And that not only comes from a free and fair electoral system, but also a thriving civil society, press that is not subordinate, that spans across the right and left of the spectrum. You know, we don't need to have one main broadsheet that is on right center, you know, editorially. We can open up the mainstream media. We don't need to have the NPPA. We need to put more trust in bloggers because they are responsible. They have brought up so many issues over the past years that mainstream media have not thought about doing. So, I mean, in terms of going back to what PM has done over the 8 years, in terms of making it a more open society, which is what he had promised, I don't see much changes.
So I was just hoping that to round it up, if everyone can just summarize, you know, something, you know, based on the motion at hand on whether Singapore has had an exceptional 8 years or not.
Personally, I feel like we can't call it exceptional. We have had great years, I would say. It could have been exceptional when you talk about certain issues that we face. And we're a small nation, emerging nation still. We're still learning, we're still opening up. And when it comes to different issues, well, some things could have been done better, and government has accepted it. And you see lately the changes in the government, like, you know, they, instead of blaming others, they have taken the responsibility, okay, yes, could have been done better. So we are in the good hands, we are in the safe hands, and I hope to see some opening up, especially in the areas of government's interest in gay and lesbian rights, human rights, opening up to areas of political discussions whereby people feel free. The students especially, the younger Singaporeans, where they feel they have a stake, they have a say, and they have a say and they have a stake in this country. They come forward with their views and they want to realize these views. All of us are leaders and all of us have a role to play. We cannot just depend on the government to lead us. We are the leaders, we should lead the nation.
I think when we talk about whether do we have an exceptional 8 years of leadership, it's debatable, hence we're having a debate. I guess the bigger issue is really looking forward. I guess, are we going to have even more exceptional years? And if we couch it in terms of our leadership, speaking about political leadership, because someone mentioned also the electoral system, I think personally I feel it matters less as to how it works. Who is it that we have in power? Is it a one-party system, multi-party system? The question is, does it work for Singapore? At the end of the day, what is it that you're able to do that will answer to the needs of the people? I think that's the core crux of it. At this point in time, we might say that the one-party system by the PAP, led by the PM, is not so encouraging. And there could be people who say, let's change that. But what you change for might not really be getting you where you want to go. So at the end of the day, it's really about constantly chipping away at the system and trying to make it better. That's really the crux of the matter, if you ask me.
I would perhaps like to sort of explain, you know, exceptional in this way. And it's sometimes, you know, the term is used, Singapore exceptionalism. That we are an exceptional society, you know, whole system is exceptional. I think a crux for me of that is the ability to take the long view and to plan, you know, many years into the future, 20 years, 30 years. I mean, that to me has been one of the strengths of this government and one of the things that the PAP has stood for. So I don't think I would quite agree that there is no vision. There is vision both on policy as well as on philosophy of governance. In terms of where I think we ought to go, you know, I think the government is you know, populated by capable people, but I also believe that, you know, the people of Singapore will likely become much more involved themselves in their own affairs. Now, whether that translates into politics or into civil society, I think in the last few years we've seen a significant growth of that in mindset. I think it will continue. So, you know, I am optimistic that there will be, you know, the necessary contest of ideas. I'm not so skeptical, but I think and believe that in the course of doing so, we should preserve the good parts of Singapore exceptionalism that this government has stood for many years.
Fortunately, we're a victim of our own success, and the PAP and its leaders are unable to respond to disruptive changes that might change their mental modes of thinking. They're too used and they're too fixed in certain ways. And to get back to the motion, if we had a leader who was able to tackle these sacred cows and able to shift Singapore in a somewhat disruptive way, then I would say that we've had exceptional leadership. I don't think we've had it over the past 10 years, and I am not hopeful for this current administration to be able to make those major changes that I think need to be made to this country.
I think now that we as a society have this idea of what needs to be done, I think we need to take arms in a way and peacefully and demonstrate that the slaying of these sacred cows will not be disruptive, will not be, will not ravage our thin fabric of society. That you always have this idea that if someone is racist or something, then everyone, they must be immediately arrested, or everyone. We can't resolve these things peacefully as a society. We can't have a discussion about it and like allow people to apologize or whatever. And what I'm getting at is, I see a real need for a kind of civic activism where we communicate bottom up, and it's no longer, and bottom up used to be a very very slow, drawn out kind of takes years process, but I think now with technology and mass media especially, we can have a few good voices that get their signals boosted by everyone else around them when they see something good, and these will naturally definitely reach people in higher levels of leadership.
I think we've had exceptional growth, but the past 8 years have not seen exceptional leadership from Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. I think I would like to see an opening up of the system, more plurality in the system, not for the sake of it, but for the sake of economic growth and for the sake of giving voice to people in the lower strata. So at the end of it, we cannot pay lip service to engagement and all that, but I think, as I said earlier, I truly believe that having plurality, a true democracy, and free media are the things that will set us to the next phase of our journey as a nation.
I don't know whether we had an exceptional 8 years, but I thought this was an exceptional discussion by some exceptional panelists. So thank you everyone for joining us.